for example, and navigate through that, or whether you go to as many trainings as possible. As a parent, I would say that's probably your best line of defense. Because even with the best system, you're still going to run into things that you're going to be like, wait a second. I think it kind of needs to go like this for my student, right? I don't want them forced into that group, and this is why. But knowing that you can say that, knowing that you've got reasons behind it that matter to your kid, right? Those are the type of things that they're going to vary it up. Yeah.
I guess since you said that, I've got to bring this up. I asked for some stuff for my son's IEP that they gave me when I had cerebral palsy. Well, we can't do that. Yes, you can. It was in my own personal IEP.
Yeah, I know it can happen. I've seen it.
Tell me you can't do it.
Yeah. I have a big trouble with can't. I have a, hey, let's get further into that and let's see how we can merge systems, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to get to things. So sometimes you'll hear something, oh, we can't do that. What can you do? Where can we get this done in a way that's going to get what we need? It doesn't have to be this. He doesn't have to have the book on an iPad, right? Going, I want all his books on an iPad, right? Well, we can't do that. We don't even support iPads. Okay, how are you going to get it done? This is what I actually need from it. Well, how would you get that done, right? And having that conversation back and forth, like, what was the mom's name?
Elise.
Elise was saying, like, once I stopped being angry and actually was like, hey, this is what you help me work with me here, it went a lot better off. Because on the other side of things, as an educator, right, when you get somebody screaming at, and I can go and go, man, I feel why you're angry at me, but I got some anger too. You want to hear my anger back? You know, like we're in a place where that's not even rational thought, right? When we really think about how our body works and what our brain's doing, and therefore we're like, I want chickens, I want ham, we're like, what are you talking about? Food? We're talking about IEP, right? Because we disconnect. So the more we can think about how can we state the need, and that's step 2 that we're going to get into after I go through these sections. Talks about asking the why, right? Maybe I don't need 20 minutes of instruction. Maybe I just need the lights turned down when I enter a room, right? That's a very simple example. Everybody thinks, oh, turn the lights down, give them headphones, we'll all be good. No, like there's a lot of things going on here. But sometimes it is just about access. And we think about, hey, can we meet them where they're at? And can we change the whole room? We can? Wait, more people benefit from that? That's amazing! Look, my classroom's running so much smoother. Who would have thunk? Right? So yeah, great conversations at break, and it really kind of brings all those perspectives. Because I think sometimes we have trouble jumping to the other perspective. You know, when you hold regular teachers, well, I have to think of 30 kids. Yes, so let's think of your room as a whole, and how we change one thing for the whole room, and look, he benefited, like we need to do it for him, but hey, let's get help to everybody else. Like, you know, so starting to get creative and thinking, okay, not can't, but let's find another way through that merges in the middle. And that's why when you think about our coaching model within the state, it's about meeting you where you're at and helping that educator find their way through versus going, do this. Right? When you go and you say, they have to do this, right? Immediately. If I told you have to lose weight, right? I'm trying to lose weight right now, like always. If somebody said, you have to do that, I would have been like, screw you, let's go get that Choco Taco, and, you know, we're done. Right? But if somebody goes, are you feeling good? You know, like, you haven't been coming out a lot. Oh, yeah, when I think about it, I've been a little depressed, and I've been eating a lot, and then I'm not moving as much, and then I don't want to move. Like, I want to be moving, right? And then I come to that decision myself, like, all right, well, then maybe I'll stop eating the chocolate tacos in the corner, and I don't want chocolate tacos because I have. Because everybody needs a chocolate taco.
Now I need a chocolate taco.
Yeah, we got donuts, and now we need a chocolate taco. Okay, so, great conversations. So, everybody's got social cognition, totally sound good, you're good to go. And now here's all your bills. So the next step, or next one, the way, and this is the way I organize it, because I like following through that criteria, but like I said, it's just the way my brain works, and I have to present it to you. If you're like, this makes no sense, let's have a conversation, I'll try to merge you into the way your brain works. But the next communicator, right, are skills within, and access points within communication. Right, kind of the way it happens, right? I love the functional diversification, right? That ability to do it in many different ways. So I got my kid that I absolutely loved that had atypical language. He had mediated echolalia, so he'd use some patterns, but was starting to use spontaneous speech within it. Okay, I gotta tell the story because it's like my favorite story ever. And he was sitting across from me. He sat down. Steinhoppel's ads were like his thing. Sat down, crossed his legs, and opened up. the newspaper, like an 80-year-old man, and he was reading his sign office ad, and I was like, hey, buddy, you gonna buy me a couch? And he turns down the corner of the thing, he goes, no money got. And put the thing up saying, no, I'm a third grader, I cannot buy you a couch, I have no money. Right? And he turned no money down into no money got, right? Totally socially connecting, nonverbals, he knew to look at me, he knew he needed to see me, right? All this stuff, but didn't have true spontaneous language and verbal output, right? It doesn't discount all the pieces that were there, right? And we get so hung up on, you have to say the sentence correctly. Like, communication's a lot of things. And you can have no words at all and be a very communicated person, right? That's how we survive in different languages when we hop and go travel. And we get stuck in writing IEP goals that stick within and when supporting just that talk or just that output device. And communication is a lot of different things. So when we think about communication, right, to be a competent communicator, you not only need a mode to get a message across, right? You also have to have those pragmatic skills, right? Topic management, right? I had a friend who had a kiddo that music was the thing, and he was high school and he'd go up to people's locker and be like, okay, so when she's walking up the hill, and then I'm like, I'm done with the sound of music. And he's like, but okay, so at the beginning, and couldn't switch to, like, hey, we went to basketball game last night together. Let's talk about that. No switching, right? You've got the turn taking, which is usually where we get stuck as well, and problem solving. Greeting. I don't know why we get stuck in greetings so much. We greet people in so many different ways. Not hi, my name is, when you're walking the room every day, but yet that's what we choose to work on, right? And then the kid goes and says hi, and they're like, well, he's saying hi to everybody. Yeah, you did that. You made it such a big deal, and you were, but he like waved to you. Take a wave, right? So. Sorry, that got, I don't know, there. But we have that range of needs. So I want you to turn and talk and say, hey, if there was a need in this area, whether it was a mode or a pragmatic skill, right? Those things of how we use our mode. What's the data, right? Because we're still in step one. What's the data either I have right now, and I can be like, he can do, which most likely you don't have sitting in your back pocket. Or what would I like to see the team take that on within this area? Make sense? All right, turn to top. 2 minutes, I'm gonna cut you off at 2 minutes. Because this group's talking. Time to go.
One of the consumers he has a very deleted one of those things where you kind of want to jump in and try to figure out a timing mechanism, like how long should I
And some of those autism, they don't know the unwritten dance in that conversation when to and when not to join.
Well, there's one he barely came.
Autism, because they have been socially organized, that's what I told you before, if they don't feel like they know the same, so I've had friends where I'll bring up something, they don't know what to say to themselves, so I'll bring something else up, they don't know what to say back.
Perfectly happy.
I think that's a good thing to for dads, like help people help him so that they can teach people.
Not learning.
Don't answer the questions until I think that's the
one thing.
Oh, it's so hard. Everybody's actually super talking about it. It's hard to cut people off.
Alright, start wrapping up your conversations. And somebody at the table, if you have a duck in your bin, raise up your duck. Alright, guess what? If you have a duck, you just got voluntold to share what you guys were talking about. So, quick, throw the duck to somebody else if you don't want it. You want to start?
Okay, so about communication, we were talking about how, and actually this is a common problem for both of us, even though Chan was sharing, that our autistic sons both have a tendency to try to figure out what, in a communication situation, what the other person wants to hear and then tell them that, regardless of what their real understanding is.
Yeah.
Just in my son's case, it's to get them off their back and make them go away, you know? And so it's hard to figure out what to do about that, and Chan said in their situation, what they did was do, in school at least, do a lot more standardized testing to show that they really weren't learning, even though they seemed to be indicating that they were learning
Alright.
in situations.
So making sure that they were gathering the data to show verbal output did not equal academic competence. All right, that would be a great data point inside getting to know the kid. That I need to know as an educator, that kid can give me back my feedback to give me just enough to say, oh, he's totally listening, we're good. But in fact, is not able to use it in actual functional way. So that would be great information to have in that
In
data.
the case of my son, the academic stuff was actually happening, but the social stuff was not at all. So we did exactly the same thing, only it was around all the social stuff, there was always pop quizzes about whatever. When he said, yeah, I get it, what did you just learn? You know, everything was a pop quiz.
Yeah. You gotta give it back to me so that I can hear it, so I can just check in to make sure that content's being mastered.
Right.
Yep, because you might, well, and then we got the kiddos who can't test at all, right? That's not an autism thing, that's a neurological thing, right? So you got a kid who could tell you up and down the wall, right? Like what it is, like here, I'll build that for you and engineer it, but you go and tell them to fill in the Scantron and they're like, fab, right? And it's nowhere close, and you're like, see, he's failing. Is he? Right? And that kind of hits to that UDL, that representation piece. Like, are we really looking at what that child has and how their output and their individual way of their brain works to get it out, right? So, yeah.
Just a real quick story about this, just a week ago or 2 weeks ago. The real world impact of this occurred. My son is very functional, runs around loose all over town by himself, and goes to his own dentist appointments, makes his appointments, goes to them. He ran into a situation where the dentist gave him a choice between getting his cavity repaired or getting a crown. And my son got back to me and asked, which one should I choose? And it turned out that there was a whole lot more to the situation that my son did not pick up at all. And it resulted in, eventually, in a dental emergency. Because he did not get what the dentist thought that he had delivered as far as all the information related to this particular tooth thing. And so it's really important, you can really run afoul of all kinds of awful things in your life when people are saying, yeah, I get it, when they don't.
Which is tough with that repair skill. Like, so we have a, like, I don't understand, please tell me more, it's an advocacy skill we can teach. But when you don't know you're missing something, you know, like, being that detective to figure out, like, did I get it all? Should I just ask just to make sure? Like, clear, you know, like, that's one of the skills that's one of the hardest to jump, is to the deep social understanding, to pare back so much background information in time to know, to be like, wait, I'm not picking it all up.
we had this discussion about a student who was blind. He's like, well, I don't know. I don't even know what's there. Like, how do I know what I don't know? Right? And how do you know when to ask?
Right.
A skill that for some of our kids has to be explicitly taught, that you have to be looking for things. Because some of us naturally do it, some of us are better than others. But that is, I have to say, one of the tougher skills to teach is to picking up clues that I didn't get at all. And if it is very blatant that you didn't get it all, just the advocacy skill of going, hey, can you go back through that? Is this what you need? And those clarifying things is very much within this communication and social communication combination. All right, who else has got a duck? Plus, aren't the ducks the best one? The duck's like my favorite. Over here. What do you guys talking about?
She had the dog.
Yeah.
She gave you.
And that's the I'm all it up for other people in the bus.
Yeah, we talked a lot about her son. She identified that he blurts out on a preferred topic in small groups, and generally off topic and not in full sentences.
Yep.
And it can be very hard to pick up the context if you haven't been with him or know what he's talking about. And then we talked about one of my students, and it was similar to what you were talking about, greetings.
Yeah.
He can display very appropriate, verbally, very appropriate greetings. Where we fell off with our teaching was the nuances of what that looks like. And so sometimes voice volume can be very loud in certain settings. He's a middle schooler now and he loves dresses. And so his eyes always move to legs.
Yeah.
And so, the team has really wanted to teach like a hard, fast rule. Well, but wait guys, we're in middle school and there is that, there's nuances to that.
Everybody's figuring it out, and at some point you might get a door going, hey, right? So I'm looking at like this.
So we were able to kind of like,
What kind of approaches are you using?
right, that all thing for us is a little beautiful greetings, but we didn't have all those other pieces in place, so now we're trying to get those in.
Yeah, and what, like, I think sometimes we get stuck in social with the skill-based, right? You're gonna take this skill and this skill versus the social cognition, which is the idea of thinking about it, like perspective taking in the bigger picture part. And it's kind of like kind of straddle both worlds. Figure out what are those discrete skills I need to teach, and what is it, I don't need to teach the awareness of the situation, because context changes everything, right? Because you can look at your wife and go, hey man, look at those legs, I love that dress, we're gonna wear dresses all the time, right? But then you walk up to a random person and you get arrested. Context matters. And in teaching, that context matters. Is there anybody else with a duck? Or did you guys like the duck? Oh, the duck table's gone. That's okay. So.
She had her hand up though.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, you have a duck. Sorry, there you go. I was gonna say, I thought I had at least three.
One of the things we talked about, and this is something I experienced, so when that group of girls brought me in and started teaching me the social rules, one of the things that they promised me was that they were never going to reject me, that I had some stability with them. And because of that stability, there were social issues I had that I was willing that I was able to like override. Like, for them, their conversations were very rapid, they were always changing subjects, but because I knew that I wasn't going to get dumped,
Yeah.
I was able to triumph over a lot of my social issues to work hard to fit in with them. Plus, probably the most powerful conclusion we all had together, which really refers to what they were talking about, the whole dresses issue, was our realization that when you're autistic, unfair gender double standards work both ways. I remember when my female friends and I sat down and we just concluded how many behaviors will get a guy arrested, will get a male in trouble that would not get them in trouble, and vice versa. And then we realized, and then we both concluded that we were both being victims of unfair double standards, and that was really kind of a bonding moment with each other.
Yeah, because the social world we live in is it's super hard. I was gonna say it's super easy. No, it's like the most complicated thing on the planet. And those of us that got set up with a brain that actually thought socially for the majority of the time still struggle, which just proves how extremely difficult it is. When you've got some base pieces and you're still falling left and right. And so this is a big piece. And when we look, the district I worked in, I got to look at a lot of
IEPs across the district, and it was a very large district. And it got me every time I come across a kiddo on the spectrum, and social communication was missed, or it was so barely touched on, and so like, is that even the issue here, right? Or you just knew you needed a communication goal because at some training you heard me say like, where's your social, right? And you're like, so I said he can say hi, right? Okay. So we miss this a lot. And for those who are working towards helping others, that especially helping other parents understand this process, if they've got a kid on the spectrum, and you know what, it might not be the definition for other disabilities, but if you got a kid who struggles socially, making it a point to address this and not letting it be because it's not reading, writing, and math. Okay, it's a big piece for us, and it's missed a lot. So thank you for examples. Thank you for those who went through and made talk. I love volunteering people, voluntolding. All right, so our next section is cognition, right? And this has nothing to do with intelligence, right? Because we know, especially autism, it's not an intellectual disability, it's a developmental disability. So yes, we can have delays in academics, but they're not guaranteed and not a part of like the instant thing of what you think when we go autism. Cognition's all about how's my brain actually getting this stuff done. Is it in time? Like the idea of I can know what to do, but can I do it when it happens? Right? You want to know to do it in that context, but not in that context, right? It's like it's the engine that drives everything going on, along with the actually emotional modulation piece that's also part of your cognition. So when we think about that, when we think about generalizing, right? How do I know back all the different things I know about dentistry to know that I don't have enough information, right? That generalizing information, bringing it all together to use it in time. How do I know that it's going to be safe going to class that I've been to 5 times already, or 20 times, 100 times, and know I can still get there and know that it's relatively going to be where I'm going to be learning math, right, and predicting out. Knowing when they say, hey, you got 2 minutes to talk, I've got 2 minutes to talk and actually having a conversation that lasts in 2 minutes, right? We're pretty good with it here, but you got kiddos, okay, you got 20 minutes, and they are doing all this other stuff, 2 minutes left, and they're like, well, no, I have to finish. What do you mean you're done? I even used the timer, buddy, like I gave you a visual. And having your brain clue in, and then be able to piece out what I gotta get done, and predict out how long each piece is gonna take, right? Lots of pieces within what's happening in your brain, you know, like your executive functioning, all those things, your regulation, all those pieces put together, to be able to actually function within the world. So, turn and talk, what would be something with your kiddo or a kiddo you've worked with that would be a data point you would want inside your step 1, the understand, right? What do I want data on? If you're magical and you've got data, put that data down. But turn and talk, what are some of the things that you would want to look for in particular to the individual you're thinking about in your head? Rectangle? Is it a fish or a rectangle?
Kelly, that was a fish.
Did you hide it?
That was a fish. Judy buried the fish.
You know what, that's an adaptive skill, that if you're too nervous to talk, you hide the visual that indicates you're supposed to talk, and therefore you don't have to talk, I'll accept it. Somebody over there, you don't have to. No one has to talk. You can hide your fish or your square. All right, so who's got a fish or a square? Who wants to share out what you guys talk about?
A fish or a square.
Oh, you need that. It's the other version of this.
Oh.
So it's just like this, but it's, yeah.
We have, I think, a bone, would you say?
Oh, yeah, that's a bone.
All right.
Yeah, like what it is. We talked a lot about, actually a variety of things, but it started out kind of thinking like in terms of behaviors, and because sometimes a lot of behaviors come back to the, when you drill down to the why, it's executive functioning related things that relate to this, lacking skills in certain areas. We talked a lot about even if you can teach a skill that, what you had talked about, that I read like that term, functional diversification.
Yeah.
So usually if there's issues in some of these areas, there's a lot of flexibility or generalization of, issues. So just because you teach a skill in an isolated setting doesn't always generalize or transfer over. So we assume, oh yeah, they have it now, and then like I'm in a school setting and you're more,
academic, but yeah.
higher education.
Yeah, and so we said, so we have kids sometimes who have tools, but they don't know how to utilize them in various settings when they become independent.
Yeah.
And I remember learning like the difference between a scaffold and a tool. A scaffold is meant to be temporary, you know, and some things can be both. A tool is something you can use.
And it depends on how you're using it.
Right, and so what we want to do is really try to shape, you know, their ability to use those tools, or those scaffolds, to make them tools that they can use in their lives. So I'm kind of talking in a circle right now, like, so your point about like what data would we need, I guess, to look at, I really think about like behaviors and those executive functioning skills kind of drill down to get at some of these pieces.
So exactly, like how do I know that he didn't generalize something? That would be, if I got data to say that I had a skill base that we worked on and he reached mastery, and then, so let's go real simple. I taught him coins and money, and he was able to buy different things from the school store, but then we went on a trip and we went to the grocery store and he wasn't able to do it in time, right? So the cashier said $3.28, and he was like, here's my wallet, right? And didn't connect at all, like just take out what you need. Right, where if I went into the school store, he would have been like $1, $2, $3, you know, and however it counts. So that would be great information to have within that understand piece, right? I have data to show that he can master a skill and generalize it within a relative thing, but context matters for him. That the switch of context for her is not, is the piece that's different. Or that might indicate, and I might want to look deeper into whether or not it's the anxiety that blocked them from the skill, right? So sometimes it might be, I didn't recognize the situation warranted that, or it could be, hey, I'm feeling a little anxious, and therefore I don't have access to my rational brain, therefore I don't have access to the knowledge I have, therefore that's not happening, right? So there's lots of different ways that your brain can stop you from doing what you want to do. And that understand piece, I want to know as much as I can about what we've seen and observed through those interactions of what happens with the knowledge and how, why, if it's getting blocked by different things and what's going on here. All right. You pulled the fish back out. Does that mean you want to talk? You guys had it in and then she forgot to start fidgeting with it.
Do you want to talk, or just with my older adult son, that sometimes he's in, I think it's exactly what you're saying, you know, sometimes he can very appropriately come to me with like a broken jacket and, you know, a zipper and need help, you know,
Yeah.
and then other times it's just a scream.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm done.
Yeah, so, I mean, to generalize or for him to take every situation, you know, or, you know, he can't find his wallet, you know, he's broken to pieces
And being able to modulate your body enough to be able to get to the need help or to seek somebody to need help.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And that's, you know, like I think back, I can't even count how many regulation goals and supports that we would put into IEPs because of that piece. Like, yeah, man, he's got it all. We're good to go. And then, nope, it didn't happen. Why it didn't happen? Well, I don't know if you noticed, but he was sitting there going like this as he's going up to the cashier. Yeah, I think maybe we got an anxiety piece here. We got to address that if we ever want him to be able to go buy, you know, like that pack of Pokemon cards, which was always the things when I took the kids to the store, you know. Pokemon, or Pogs. Like it goes in phases.
Yes, one of the things I think also happens a lot, which is why we have that lack of transferability, is that neurotypicals often have an instinctual understanding of the reason behind a social expectation or a skill, whereas the people with autism, it's not instinctual, it's just some academic thing, like if you were learning the law of gravity in a physics class. I remember learning that experience when I started working at anime conventions. There's a social code that people who start working there have to learn. But because it's not something you learn, you know instinctively, everyone teaches you, but you also get to learn why certain rules are. And going through those motions helped me understand that many rules, they have reasons, but we just don't always teach them, because the people teaching them often distinctly understand when the person with autism doesn't.
Yeah. The person who's teaching it didn't realize that piece was missing to make the connection for the child, right? I think that sometimes we can't, things that instinctually happen for us, it's hard to break down all the way down to some of those skills. To even think about, oh, I need to teach that, right? Like, to break it down. It made me think of something, and then I went, oh, right out my brain. So hopefully I will swing back to it. Yeah.
Along with your money example,
Yeah.
I started circling items on a sale flyer from Millie to buy at the grocery store, and I'd ask for the receipt. And he had a complete meltdown in the grocery store, and the lady called me, and I was like, okay, and I went over, had him, and he goes, Mom, I just got scared.
Yeah.
So then she says, well, why don't you give him a debit card next time?
Yeah.
So we tried it, and I gave him a card, and he did really, really well. And I looked at him and I go, he's like, Mom, this is great. I can buy anything I want in the store, and all I have to do is give you a piece of paper. And he said, what? Like, you know, he didn't get the card where the money comes out of the bank account. You have to have the money there.
Yeah, oh, this is fantastic. Very common in college for kids, if you have any kids going to college.
So we went back to cash and he started being better. But he freaked out when I told him, look, this is all the money we just took out of the bank account. This goes towards, I literally had to sit down and go, this money goes towards rent.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, we pay rent.
And there were layers to this.
And once we had a big meeting and we talked to other people, it was fine. But it just, the whole one incident of being nervous at the store. And he'd gone hundreds of times before.
Yeah.
Everything just snowballed and he kind of crawled up into a wall and just said, how do I do this?
Yeah, and then it was overwhelming. It wasn't even something you could access, even though we had all the academic pieces to do it. Yep. That connection piece is huge, and sometimes we don't think to connect it down. Right. All right, not down, in. All right, sensory. I feel like sensory is the one that if your educator's gonna, like your team's gonna understand, it's like the sensory is the ones they understand, because everyone's got a sensory system, right? And whether or not your sensory system is a barrier to you is, very, I don't want to use the word spectrum, but this is huge, huge spectrum. So we think about, I have major sensory issues, which it's interesting. Me and my coworkers joke a lot, and one of our trauma-sensitive care coworkers was like, well, you guys need to respect the da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, okay, I just don't like being touched. It is not something that will cause me to have major anxiety over. So lovely for protecting me, but I have a sensory system that just prefers not being randomly touched. So not gonna push me over the edge if somebody bumps me. But who's had that kid who gets barely brushed, and they're like, right? And that is not just an autism thing. There's a lot of different people who have sensory systems that react very well. So that wasn't just a brush. It was, you just punched me, I'm gonna punch you back, right? So I don't like things on my ankles. So these shoes will last, until December because I don't like socks. I'd be barefoot all the time if I could. But it's not a sensory dysfunction, not to the point where it's a barrier that prevents me doing what I want to do. When we think about it, we think about where's that line, right? You can have supports within using sensory stuff. The fidgets are a good example. How many of you are, using the duck or the fish, or like I said, because they're like the favorites in there, right? But you didn't need it to learn, right? When it comes into an IEP, it's when you need it to learn. Okay, so people are like, well, that's just something everybody has access to. Yes, that's phenomenal. And so I'm glad that you have fidget boxes at all your tables and that it's not distractible, because there's a percentage of kids where fidgets actually are the opposite of helpful, right? So might be great because you see that a lot of kids are more efficient with them, but the kid who, if he didn't have that fidget, would not be able to make a 20-minute span, all right, then it's an IEP thing. Okay, then we're talking about I found a support, moving on. So if I know that, if I know that sensory system input helps, I can take data on that. Or a lot of the data we see is when sensory systems go wrong, right? The big, I get brushed and I get, it feels like a punch, and so we take data on that. Or I didn't notice my hand was getting burned because my sensory system, my brain didn't connect it back fast enough and I actually got really harmed, right? So there are different layers to how our body and our brain takes in the input from the environment. So within that step one, you're thinking about what is that about the kid, because everybody's got a sensory system, and if it helps in a supportive way, I want to know that. Maybe it's a strength. Maybe they're able to manipulate things because their tactile is just so amazing, right? Or their visual perception is just, ooh.
Or is it something that you need to actually support or modify access to? Because if I go into a room and the lights are really bright, I can't learn, right? So turn and talk about a data point you would hope would be another thing about your kid, or one you've seen, or things that you would want to see within that first step of the 5-step process. And I know we're spending a lot of time in step 1, but if we don't know the kid, I didn't know what the other steps are. I'll let you guys do it. I'll take one person who wants to volunteer versus me telling you. Since I got you talking now, we won't all stand silent at me. So who wants to share what the group talked about, or Kara talked about? Yeah.
Again, both Chan and I are going like, how dumb is this that we had in our IEP eye contact?
Yeah.
What a stupid thing to waste time on, especially when it was painful.
Yeah.
You know, it just, there's all kinds of compensations you can make that don't require eye contact. But
Yes, and having that, teaching that in the IEP. Yeah. Looking at a forehead, looking at a shoulder, doing the occasional. How many of you seen is it Atypical? It's a Netflix show where she's like, when you like somebody, you stare them in the eye. So he just started going like this.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, less creepy. Or smile, smile. She's just told him to smile. He's like, he just like, and she's like, no. She's like, less. And he's like, less. And they're going through.
Yeah.
Because, right? Just smile at her. You don't know. And then she actually goes in. It was a really nice thing. You look down, you look away every once in a while, and you look up. And that nuance, right? But you have to teach that versus looking in the eyes, look, come on, you know, like, and culturally that is totally not supportive in every culture. It's damaging, you know, so, yeah, it's funny to talk about eye contact, 'cause that's one of these huge ones. And it's one that we feel like it's one of those ones, like, let's put in there, like, let's work on that first. Okay, well, that's not the end all be all of social interaction. And man, is it complicated. Like, the way we use our eyes is a huge thing. Sorry, I cut you off in the middle. Did you have?
No, that was just, I mean, since my son is so old, we didn't know all this stuff back then. I just wish I could go back and, I mean, it was even in the IEP that we would look people in the eye.
Yeah, you're excited about it, yeah.
He still doesn't look anybody in the eye, but now we give him a pass on it. It's like, forget.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I wish I could go back to. There are so many things, even just like 10 years. And you know, like 5 years, you're just learning so much more. The more we learn about the brain, the more it's like, and the more people that are aware enough to have conversations like this about it, and you can be like, wait, like what I'm thinking is real? Oh, I'm feeling so bad. Like, oh my gosh, there's actual data on that? Like proof and research? Ah, I'm so excited. All right, last one. Behavior repertoire, right? That's your coping, your managing of coping skills, prediction skills like your flexibility, your cognitive flexibility, right? Much like cognition, right? I love our lovely criteria for the way it patterns things out, but I also hate it in the way it patterns things out. So this is like that idea of when and where. How am I going to use this? Sensory modulation. What's it look like, sound like, right? What's the behavior output that results in what I want to get done? Does that make sense? So if I am like understanding that it's anxiety and working on the fact that I need to have coping skills to be able to use my social and academic skills to be able to be interactive with people and my cognition skills to do it in time. Okay, so this is like the skill basis. Cognition's like how I get it done. Here's like the things I need to know. I guess that's a way to look at it. Okay, let me try this again. Now I'm not going to be able to come up with anything. No, so when I think about this, it's about me teaching a 5-point scale so that a child can learn the pattern out of what coping means, right? And I would think that cognition would be being able to recognize I need it and move forward with it. Yeah.
So is it like taking the cognition is more like the awareness of the system we're putting it in
The action? Yeah, and what it looks like, sounds like
Okay.
the output of it all, right? A lot of times when we go to look at data, people are like, here's all the challenging behaviors we see, right? This is how they're not getting it done correctly. But because when I think of behavior repertoire, it's like a combination of everything else we've already talked about. That's why it's a hard one to explain, because I feel like it is a mesh of all the different pieces, and then it comes out this way. It comes out in a bite
It comes out with a dinnable, right? Yeah.
Is this, I'm trying to reword this in a way I can.
Yeah, I know, I'm not getting there. I feel it.
Is this like how the student responds to change?
It can be, yeah. So change and flexibility is a huge part of that, right? But change and flexibility has so many pieces of all the other things intertwined.
Of course.
That, yeah. So when you think about it, like when you think about the medical diagnosis, it's about that rigidity. Like I used to call this section rigidity, right? Getting stuck. There we go, you got me back, thank you so much. Getting stuck in where you are and not being able to get all your skills out and your behavior out.
So like adaptability, you're able to adapt.
Yeah, and being able to use the skills you've got and the functions you have within that to be able to change things up, right? So whether it is, like your typical, not typical, but the things, he lines everything up. Yeah, okay, that would be something I might sit there and talk about, that he needs things in order. Or I can't code change, and so I talk like Mickey Mouse all the time. So I'm not adjusting from talking with friends where it's totally cool because we're in a Mickey Mouse club to I'm talking to my teacher, things like that. So anyway, it intertwines with all the other ones.
One of the things that really expanded a lot of my repertoire, having autism, was during my homeschool years, I was very into anthropology, and I actually ended up reading the work of a man named Marvin Harris, and he was an anthropologist who spent his entire career dissecting unwritten social expectations and cultures all over the world.
Yeah.
And he proved that every unwritten rule in every culture had a reason that the culture's members instinctively got, but couldn't express. And seeing how those rules existed and the reasons they did really expanded the repertoire to be able to cognitively speculate what the reasons were so that I could follow them. Yeah. One riddle, for example, that is often shared in the anime community is, in most settings, it is impolite to ask a female you meet their age. At anime conventions, it is impolite not to ask a female you just meet their age. It's the other way around. And there's a reason in the culture of anime why it's expected, even though it would not be in other settings.
Another setting. That's interesting. All right. I'm not going to make you talk this one out because I feel like I gave you a really bad base for it. So, but what I do want you to think about is that flexibility piece that a lot of our kids really struggle with, and it can come up in social stuff. It can come up in communication. It can come up in sensory. It can come up in the way I process things, right? So it kind of weaves through all of them. So now that we know our kid, right? You guys get, so that's why we're looking through the lens of autism. We've kind of gone through what it is we go. We're going to move on from step one. And now it's going to go a little faster because we've got our kid. Now it's just asking the questions and making some decisions, which is going to be a little false here because we're not with our team. We're not making decisions about a kid. And we don't have all the data we really need to be able to move forward. But I wanted to do it this way so that we kind of are walking through what you might experience sitting down through a CCR IEP. So step one, is everybody good with understanding what should be the first thing you're getting done within your IEP, right? Getting to know that kid. Strengths, access points, and skill bases. Okay. It's the what. The next is now we're going to identify the effects of the disability and then make some decisions about disability-related needs. Okay? So this, in watching this actually happen in a district, is where your educators are getting jumped up a lot. Because I think a lot of times we want to just get right to the point, and so we jump, right? He's not reading, it's a phonics skill. And so they're like, I did it. And sometimes you did. But there's a lot of value in that conversation about why. Because you can find out access points that maybe didn't need specially designed instruction. So that's going to be supplemental gaming service. Or you're like, oh man, we would just give them headphones. Maybe we actually have to teach them how to advocate for the headphones, right? And so we're going to have a combination of supplementary support and specially designed instruction, right? So this process right here is where we're really getting to why we're sitting and talking about a kid, right? We know him, but now how are we going to take that knowledge and actually make it worth it for the kid for us to know them, right? And have these services in place. So we're going to identify the student's disability effects, their academic and functional achievement, and then we're going to decide, moving forward, the next steps, how to get it done. So when we think about all the different areas that this lens of autism gives us, right? What do we see? Right? What does it look like, sound like? And what are the results of what we see? What are our concerns? And also,
does it occur everywhere? So we're thinking about context. So it's what it looks like, sounds like. It's, you know, like, so, well, he's got this challenging behavior. Great, thanks for using that label. What's it look like, sound like? Okay, so this is now looking at, now we know where the kid's at, got all our data, but what it looks like, sounds like in his educational experience, okay? Johnny goes to social studies, and he can't get into a group and do the project, right? That's what I can see, right? So, and then he fails, and he doesn't get his grade for social studies, right? So there we go, there was his effect. Okay, so your first step in this process is to label what it looks like, sounds like. And there's actually a part inside the IEP that we write this now, and it's called the effect statement. So it was always there, right? Some people call it an impact statement, depending on the language they had in the forms they used, right? It was, and the way we did it wrong was when they said, he is getting special education because he has autism, right? People just left it like that. Where the effect statement is all about that I in IEP, right? He is struggling with being able to do skills in time because of anxiety, or, you know, like, nope, that's before. He's struggling with doing skills that we know he mastered in time. He struggles with advocating for himself in an appropriate way. He struggles with communicating wants and needs in a way that people who don't know him know, right? These are all effects. So I want you to turn to your group and say, think about the data you guys are talking about in the areas. And one thing it looks like, sounds like, something that's observable, not why, don't start adding in whys. Like, not because he does this, because of this, right? What does it look like? What's the barrier? I like thinking about it, what's the barrier here? What's stopping him from accessing, engaging, or progressing in his curriculum? Does that make sense? Right? This is the first part of step 2. Okay? So if you're looking on your page, it's the dark green column. This one, right? How? How is he affected? How is she affected? All right, turn it off. Sure. So ignorance is our thought processing process, right? It's those characteristics or those things we can observe that are showing us that he or she's not meeting the expectations, whether it's standards or social. Or functional, right? So we're asking what do we see related to those current levels, right? So what's this difference? Here's the expectation, and I've got this barrier here, right? But also, what strengths do we have in relation to this that make him successful? Context matters. One of the conversations was about, well, sometimes it's about the time of year we have this IEP on whether or not he's struggling or not. And we're thinking about that, like, is there timing issues? We didn't have time to know what context he's going to be in and what the environment changes up for that. So yeah, he's got a really strong strength in this that's affected by the environment, but that's a strength because he's really good at math. But he always fails in math because we decide what's going to happen in math before we understand the context and the environment. So thinking about and observing what are those pieces, but not just looking at this isn't working. What are the strengths and how are those affected? Right? What are we seeing? So it's not just it's affected because he can't meet this thing, but it's affected because it just changed environments. And so really we had a strength that we were talking about that changed. Why? Which is going to be our next question. So some of the examples that you can get from DPI, and the combination, the effect statement, everybody's, how long is it supposed to be? It can be as long as you want. In my mind, this is the I in IEP. It gives you all that data in words that show, I can go and go, that's that kid. I just found him. I read his IEP, and I can know what his reading level is, what his communication mode is, all that. And there might be 4 or 5 of them, but if I read the effect statement, I should be like, oh, it's him, her. Right? Just over here. And that's in my mind. That's not like on my DPI notes. That like literally is the way I look at this. And a lot of times we like to copy and paste this part. Right? We used to all the time. I used to all the time. I'm like, yeah, because he's got autism, so he's got social communication, he's got this and this. Chink! And I just did it. And man, was now I know better. Like, you know, how does social communication is so many things. Like, if I was going to write how it was a barrier or a difference, or it was he was affected in that way, I need to know how it is for him. Is it same for her, him, right? So that effect statement in my mind is like, yeah, IEP. So if somebody does not read or understand grade level text materials independently or with support, good to know. That's definitely something we should narrow in on. has difficulty understanding unfamiliar 8 multi-step instructions, and completing tasks involving text. Okay, good to know, and I'm gonna help out that. Understanding vocabulary and responding improves when using picture-based communication tools. Great, that gives me context, right? So really good at communication when you got the right communication tool. You don't, it's a barrier. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So once we start seeing, okay, what are we narrowing in? What is really the thing we're gonna be focusing on, or things most likely, that we're gonna narrow into support so that this child can gain access and be able to access, engage, and progress in their IEP. And the next step is starting to ask those why. It's that root cause. Okay? And that was a fun video that we won't be able to access about the Jefferson Memorial, right? They're spending so much money cleaning it, and I think it was actually destroying the building because birds just poop on it everywhere, right? And so they're like, well, why do birds poop on it, right? Because they're eating bugs. Well, where are all the bugs coming from? Because we leave it lit up all night. And so tons of bugs come to lights, therefore we get lots of birds, there we get lots of, I almost swore, we get lots of bird poop. So they decided, well, let's just turn off the lights earlier. Poop went down, cleanings went down, save money, not destroying, yay. Because we actually stopped to think, why? Okay, so that's the next step, is asking why. So we're gonna work through an example from DPI. Let's say the student is failing in math, right? That's what I can observe. The expectation is he's to be able to do this geometry class, get this credit. I observe that he is failing, right? I've even got some really good data on that. Okay. So why? Because the student has difficulty understanding the concepts. Okay, so he's not making those connections. Why? Because the student's missing instruction, right? So now we're going in a different direction. Like, oh, wait a second. So he had difficulty understanding, but when I thought about it, man, he's never here. He's not actually getting the instruction, right? So why is he missing instruction? Because he's always late to class. He's missing like 15, 20 minutes. So why? Because the student's having difficulty moving from class to class. Right? Well, why is he having that difficulty? Because the student walks slowly and has difficulty navigating busy hallways and stairs. Right? So if I stopped here, like even if I stopped up here, I'm going to do a lot different for that kid than what was actually the need. Right? Being able to get through a busy hallway is stopping his math. Math is not stopping his math. Right? But we jump to math stopping his math real fast. But when you root cause it and you dive down, you might end up with something that has nothing to do with actual ABC 1, 2, 3. And a lot of times with our kiddos on the spectrum, it doesn't, right? We're not an intellectual disability. It's a developmental one. We've got all those factors we've already walked through. A lot of times, those are the barriers that are holding us back and making us behind. It's not about ABC 1, 2, 3. Sometimes it is. I'm not saying that there aren't kiddos that have those difficulties as well. But we jump to the academic piece being the problem. And sometimes it really, it comes to something different. I'm really angry that that circle's not in the right place. Sorry.
Here's an example. I can actually give another example of this from
Yeah.
that happened in the 5th grade. Student is coming into class late, and not able to get to gym on time. However, student is entering the building on time. Why? Because student struggles with tying his gym shoes for gym because the gym teacher won't let him use Velcro gym shoes. If teacher just lets student use Velcro gym shoes, student would get there on time and get to gym on time.
And you know what? Velcro and no-tie shoes are cool now, which is really awesome. Just to totally take a note off of that. I was so happy when I was seeing other kids without tie shoes. I'm like, oh my god, finally. No more tying shoes. Like goals. Like, haha, OT, he's got no shoelaces to tie. So, sorry, there are any OTs in the room. I love OTs. So, like, that cannot be the only thing we're working on here. So when we're thinking about that root cause analysis, right? We're looking at what we know, we can observe, and we start asking ourselves why. We got to make sure in that conversation, it's a concern for everyone. That's why I love when I did this training, and not this training, but training about IEPs in the past. So how many of you, when you called to get the date, asked the parent, what top 3 things, if we helped with it, would help at home? Right? What an easy way. That's Michelle Lord, by the way. I know who she is. I stole that from her. What an easy
way to, before you even start about thinking about making this document, you asked another team member, what would be a high value thing to you? Right? And I'm gonna work that in somehow, because let's face it, most often our special education is making a nice little big draft before we walk in. It is a draft. For those who, if you're new to this, it is a draft and change in any way it needs to change during that meeting. But we, for time's sake, often come with a nice draft. But that's a nice way, if that's the way your system works, to get a team member influence, and a pretty powerful team member influence, before we even start about thinking making that document. Right? And student, that's the other piece. What are you asking about the student? And somebody mentioned having their son or daughter come to the IEP meetings. People wait till transition age when it's like a check mark on a box. Dude, I had like first graders coming in with me, and all I said, what do you like? I saw a teacher with fifth graders who had them make PowerPoint. So they did technology, she had like 20 standards in this project she did, all about them making a PowerPoint for their IEP. They came, they gave the PowerPoint, they decided whether or not they were gonna stay. Oh, I don't think any kid ever decided to stay. Because like, if you ever ask the kid, like, what do you think we do? You just talk about all the things I do wrong, right? No, man, we also spend a lot of time talking about how cool you are. They don't want to be a part of it usually. I'm not saying ever, but yeah, so having that student voice, and it can happen at an early age. Having a kid who's 3 point to likes and dislikes and say, hey man, I sat down and just showed him likes and dislikes and he was all about Thomas or all about this, and we got to work that in somehow, okay? And then we start asking our whys, right? We get our information, we start asking whys, and we deep dive. So we don't end up repeating math skills for a kid that literally we just have to help him get the hallway so he can get there on time. And then this is the other piece that really trip up. You know, like for a while, people say, ask 5 times. Some people are like, you have to ask why 5 times. All right, well, I find in my experience it's not always why, and it's not like always 5 times. Sometimes you know the kid well enough in the group and you're talking out, and like you got to a root cause. And you're like, can we why this anymore? No, that's it. Some people go so far in and like, I can't influence the neurological makeup. So what are we gonna do with it? Went too far, right? So, well, the brain connections aren't working efficiently. I can't do anything with that. I went too far, let's back it. What can I influence? So that's where I've seen teams in the past trip up the most. They either think they need to keep diving and they go to a place that we can't affect, and put sports in place, or they stop too early. And they just go, yeah, he doesn't have math skills, right? But why doesn't he have math skills, right? And that team kind of dive is where the really good information comes out. And you need the team to do that, right? If you don't have a parent or a student sitting with you talking about that, we don't have the team that's going to make the decision that we need. So, but I'm preaching to the choir. So. Once we have what we think the root cause is, right? So it was the bugs, it's the student learning to change the lights for the Jefferson Memorial. Then we start deciding, okay, now I know I can lead to a need, right? So I say, this is what it looks like. We dive into why it's happening. Now we're going to start moving on to what to do about it. What's that need? It's not just he has autism. No, what's the specific need? The student has a need to develop skills and social awareness so he can advocate for da-da-da-da-da. This student needs skills in time management to be able to get to class on time, manage assignments, right? Does that make sense? And DBI has some really nice, if you go to their website, sentence stems to help you fill things in. Do you have to use those sentence stems? No. I highly recommend it. They're quite nice. Why are we being at the wheel? Always watch people, well, I don't want to say it that way. We'll say it the way you got to get the point across, right? What's the need and what's it going to affect, right? So I have what we've decided is the root cause, and it goes back to those effects, and that's what it's going to affect, right? It's affecting all these things. And so now we have to decide, what are we going to do about it? So within disability needs, right, you're synthesizing, clarifying, summarizing, and trying to reach a consensus, right? So I've got a need that leads back to those effects because we had that root cause
conversation. And now we're gonna move forward and actually think about what we can do for it. This is where I like to talk about, actually this is Daniel Parker. He gave me this idea a while back before it became a part of the CCRIP. But UDL kind of breaks things apart in a really nice way to frame thinking on what's being affected, right? So when we think about options to self-regulate, yeah, self-regulation could be some of the whys, right? When we think about that output, how I'm being able to take what I'm seeing in and then get it back out, right? I may not be able to take that test. So just at the general thought process of how they organize UDL, it's a great way to start thinking about if I'm stuck. I'm like, I don't know how to ask why. I don't know where to start. I do like what Daniel showed me, which was how do you kind of framework it. So might not be where your brain goes, but if your brain goes nowhere, and the handouts I used today were here like like these, maybe this will connect you to it. Because I really want you guys to leave with a way to start the conversation of what the effects and why it's happening, and the language around to create an actual good need. Because once we get that disability-related need, this is what's going to drive, like, it connects everywhere. How many of you heard of the linking form, right? We're gonna move into the linking form. Parts of this is already in the linking form, but it's all linked together through this disability-related need. So it's a big piece because it's really driving where we're going with this IEP. So that, in essence, is step 2. Does that make sense? Does that get back to what you were talking about before? If we could just understand why you punched him, right? Now I've got some good data, even if it's data about how many times he punched, right? To open the conversation, to start asking why, to get to a point of the need so that we can help him get through communicating without the punch, right? Or getting his wants and needs met that punch doesn't become a necessity. Okay. So then we move on to annual goals. Right? Because we've got lots we can do with this disability-related need, right? Now we're going to think about those nice, measurable, high expectations of meeting the kids where they're at, annual goal. When we develop goals, right? Ambitious, achievable, right? Those are your taglines. Looking to close that achievement gap, right? You'll hear people say, well, they're special ed, that's why they're behind. No, we're not finding the thing to help them. Right? Special ed doesn't mean you can't get there. There are some tough barriers, and there are some things you can't change, like there's physical things we can't change. You can't change that we're wired differently, but I can definitely find ways to make things more efficient or access better. So it might not be the typical way, but I'm going to find a way to make it more efficient and advocate for things like that. And that to support the actual I in IEP. Okay? Our goals cannot be copy and pasted. Because we're really thinking about what was that root cause. It needs to connect back to what disability-related need we found for that kid. So it's not like everybody's working on money. Although everybody might be working on money, we're all going to access it in different ways. Okay? I love this is off of the step check that I showed you earlier, those PPI resources. The key ideas off of here, they should address the why. Right? It's not just about he needs to get a better grade in reading. That's not why we're here. It's a result of why we're here, right? But I don't know. We have a life after the grade that I get in freshman English. So connecting it back to the actual root causes we need to help that student with. It relates back, and there actually is in the linking form. You have the forms that GPI suggests. You're literally putting a number to show you what disability-related need your goal relates to. Okay. And then they're measurable, ambitious, and achievable. That has been the tagline for years. That hasn't changed. They still need to be that. And making sure you can actually track data on what you write for a goal. And I laugh because it happens a lot. So, when we're thinking about goals, we already heard some goals we don't kind of want to see anymore, which is just the basic give me eye contact, right? What's an example of a good goal that connected to a kid that hit kind of what we're talking about, that disability-related need and the why we're actually helping them? Does anybody have a good example? You don't have to give the actual goal, but like the theme of the goal. No, because you're like, now we're really getting close to the time we need to leave, and I have a major move on. All right. James, you want to give me one?
I think it's more trying to help kids understand, like, like I said, some of the reasons behind many of those goals, like,
Yeah.
I want you to get good grades to do this. If you don't make eye contact, you might scare other kids, things like that.
Yeah, the understanding of it and the instruction within it. I had a really good, and I cannot remember who it was, so I can't plug them, and it's horrible, but who said, if you think about how much it costs to give special education services, right? And we're thinking about all these goals. Is that a $5,000 goal? Is that worth $5,000 worth of money to get done? Look me in the eye, $10,000, let's say, because a complicated kid can be up to like $60,000 to $70,000 a year, right? Is that a $60,000 goal? Look me in the eye. Is that a $60,000 goal? Say hi when you enter a room, right? Or is teaching awareness of when greetings need to happen to make a connection to have a social interaction, right? Is that a $60,000, right? Is that going to help them after they pass our doors, okay? So when we think about goals, you think of your tagline, which let's make sure I don't mess it up, right? Ambitious and achievable, but purposeful and connected. When we look at the next step, 4, 5, where is that, 4? Right, this is when we start thinking about services. And it surprises people when I say there's 4 services. Does anybody know what the 4 services are?
Special design instruction, related services, supplementary aids and services for personnel.
Yeah, and what's really funny is you almost went in the order that the old forms were in, right? 9-1, 9-2, 9-3, 9-4. Pretty close, right? So now we're linking, and now we're like, you know what? We have been deficit-based way too long, people.
Yeah.
So we need to switch that and get up with the times and have our forms reflect that. And so DPI's like, you know what, we're going to start with the strengths. So now you'll see the linking form actually starts with the strengths, and it guides you into actually using the strengths, right? Throughout, even when we're thinking about that effect statement, it was just, you had strengths that might have barriers to them, but you had some strengths you could list in those effects as well, and it was context that changed it. So when we think about our aligning services, we're going to think strengths-based, and we're going to think supplementary aids and services first. Right? How can I gain access before I have to teach explicit skills? So as we were going through that root cause and coming up with lagging skills or whatever language you want to use, the barriers, right? There were a lot of things I might not have to explicitly teach. I just needed support. So that kiddo that knew all the math and did it in one classroom and the next year didn't do it in the next classroom, right? And we'll say, for talking sake, it was the same skill. I might have a ton of supplementary aids and supports to make sure that he can access in the same way that he was successful with the skill set he has. Yeah, James.
I actually will give it, and I think that's very important. What's also important too is as a kid advances in each grade in elementary school or later, that the previous teacher lets the other teacher stuff the kid has learned.
Yeah.
I remember a situation I got into in the 5th grade where I was being taught the same skill I learned in the 4th grade, but with a different method I couldn't use. And then I said to my teacher, I can do this skill, but it worked better the way my 4th grade teacher taught me. And what the teacher did was, instead of acknowledge that this was something that the other teacher at the school did, mocked it, called it the unreliable James method for solving the math problem, when in reality, it actually did the same job, and he was constantly trying to bash and said that when it didn't work, even though he completely misunderstood how the 4th grade teacher taught it.
Yeah, and it might have been not actually understanding the process, or he was struggling with some rigidity issues as well. But there are pieces where you have school systems that say, no, you have to teach it this way. Okay, I'm going to help that student, James, go through and say, I'm going to go through it like this, right? But I'm also going to allow you to show me you know how to get it done. So I might have to still teach you the way that doesn't make sense to your brain, because logistically I have to. But having that conversation, knowing the student, go, but show me, can you do this problem in your method so I can see that you are connecting the math in the way that we need, right? So I don't know how you would put that in a supplementary aids and service, but it's definitely something that's in the conversation in our previous pieces, right? And we might have some different thinking through processing, that one way is not always
Well, what I was thinking about is the 5th grade teacher didn't know what my other teacher taught me. And that is just
Yeah.
making sure that if you go from grade to grade, the other teacher gives that information.
Gives that information, which might be a nice piece to put within that, getting to know that student. So here's a couple screenshots of where we go from the summary of the disability-related needs, right? And that's where you actually list them out. And people are like, well, you know, like in some of the forms, there's like 4 boxes, or there's 7 boxes, do I have to fill them all? No, you do as many as you need for that kid. Know that you're linking back to those needs. So if you're saying it's a need, I'm hoping there's something you show that you're doing with it, right? I think it's a requirement, right? So there's be this disability-related need floating up here, and we don't have anything aligned to it. Doesn't mean it has to have a goal. Some things you just have supplementary and service for. Just gotta change up the environment to meet you where you're at, so you can access it. Because it might not be something I'm gonna teach you right now, I might teach you later. But right now I'm just gonna give you that calculator. We're so quick to get a calculator for math, right? But we don't do so much for the cognitive prosthetics, right? You get the wheelchair to a person who can't walk, right? And we have that need, and you're okay with that, but then we talk about giving them a social support of the teacher has to say, okay, when you find a group, do less than 4, and we put that piece in place, which I can put in the supplementary, that directions are given in a certain way. We don't think that way, and a lot of times we call it cheating. Or we were like, well, no, now we're giving in to them. We're not actually teaching them. Well, sometimes we have to put things in place so a kid can access until we can get to that teaching piece. Because it's too big of a jump, right? We gotta meet people where they're at. Give them the jump they can do, right? If I came in here and I only did technical, all acronym, like I wouldn't be meeting where you're at. If I only talked compliance today, you'd be like, dude, get out the door. I said PCSA and I didn't explain everything, and we had a conversation about that, right? That districts get, people think of it as an audit system, right? But it's not. They come in, we do the self-check, right? It's a self-assessment, right? And you're looking through where are we going right, where are we going wrong. And for most districts, actually I think all districts, but like 1 or 2, it happens every 5 years, right? The other 2, it happens 1 or 2, it does happen every year. Right? So it's not this end-all, be-all, catch-all, right? It really is a responsibility of the educators around to get the knowledge. Because there isn't some check that's going to make it happen. So I misspoke a little bit earlier. But if I would have sat in that language the whole time, just PCSA language, I wouldn't be meeting where you're at, right? But we do that all the time in IEPs. Well, I got to teach the skill. How about we just get the access? We change the environment, and later on we're going to either teach them how to advocate, right? And that'll be the skill I'll teach. Advocate that I need this, right? I know a lovely woman who has a lot of different movement issues, and she came into a meeting one time and said, I have to do this to be able to listen to you guys. So if it distracts you, please sit where you can't see me, right? Great. Big movement. She needed big movement to listen. And she advocated for herself. I'm not going to tell her quiet hands, which I love. Oh, who was the parent at the autism conference that was like, quiet hands make no sense. They're not loud. You know, I forgot to write down that it was a parent. Maybe I can grab you and find out who that is, because I say that all the time. The quiet hands. I was like, you're right. And I don't know how many times I said quiet hands in my career, and you know, it's one of those things you're like, oh, God, I missed the mark on that one. So when we think, oh, that was a tangent. Now I got lost. So when we think about, what was I talking about? Linking. Oh, MET. We're going where we're at. When we're thinking about supplementaries and supports, it's not just the earphones for fire drills. It's not just walking to class 5 minutes early so they don't have to go to the hallway. There's lots of different avenues we can go there so that people can have access, right? Sorry, I'm talking a lot. When we think about supplementary aids and supports, it should be the first thing we're talking about. How do I get access? Then we're going to move to specially designed instruction. What do I actually still need to teach? And that might change up. Something that sat in the supplementary aid and support, you might go, hey, is that scaffolding versus support? Yep. So when you're thinking about, hey, now I'm ready, now the child is at a place that he can connect, I'm going to move that into a specially designed instruction so we can take that need for support away and teach him how to do it. Does that make sense? Okay. Some skills go straight to specially designed instruction. They don't go through. But thinking about that first, how can I get that child access to narrow in on what is the biggest bang for my buck with my services? Okay. I also want to put the plug into, we often work on systems when it comes to where we're going to deliver services, whether it's supplementary aids and services or specially designed instruction, right? And you're like, well, we're a pull-out school. Okay, Well, that's lovely. How do you find a way to interrupt for that kid, right? Because I can't change the world. I can't change the logistics of school. I can't just be like, hey, superintendent, we're doing it this way now. But as an individual, I can say, all right, I'd like to have a conversation about that. How can that look differently? How can I meet you where you're at? And I am here with the need I see in my head and the things we're kind of been talking about, and get somewhere so that we change up the environment first, right? Maybe we just UDL it. I know that's not supposed to be a verb, but I'm gonna think, how can I just change up the environment so it's more inclusive and hit some of the barriers my kid needs, not just do it for everybody, right? Then I gotta go, okay, how can I change up my activity as a teacher? How can we change up that activity so that everybody can access and the barrier's not there anymore for that 1 or 2 kids that might have the IEP for in that specific thing? Then maybe I change up the materials. Maybe I need an assisted grip. Maybe I need an AlphaSmart instead of handwriting it, right? Then I'm gonna go, okay, now I'm gonna change up my instruction. I'm gonna approach this in a different way. And then I'm gonna go to assistance and specially designed instruction, right? That when we think about it that way, and what can I do before I go to pulling this kid out and specifically teaching? How can I change your environment? How can I look at things in a general view and get more specific within that general view, and then go back and go, okay, you know what, actually, we're to the point, this actually needs to be taught specifically for this kid. But I'm always in that cycle, going back and thinking, right? So I'm teaching, how am I, when I got that skill, how do I get it back to we're handling it within a typical environment that might be just environment change, just activity change.
I was just gonna say, just to, one of the things might be just to have the student be able to leave class earlier to prepare, so he doesn't have to go through the noisy hallways and all that stuff. So the one thing could just be an accommodation and nothing else.
Yes.
Because he's doing okay.
Which would sit in that supplementary aids and services, right? And we think about it, people go, well, that's not the real world. Well, I'm going to teach him resilience skills. Right. But he can have a job where he doesn't have to walk through a hall of teenagers. So we're going to fill that need.
Yeah.
And we might not work on it in school other than advocacy skills to say, I'm sorry, or in awareness skills, I'm not going to pick that job. I'm not going to be a high school teacher. I'm not going to pick that job. I'm not going to work at a state fair. Right? I'm going to pick a job that works for the system and the way my brain works. Right? So, so that's my UDL plug, like always thinking back. And then always thinking about where are we going after, right? It's empowering that kid. If you're a special educator, or they're going to leave you. You are not going to McDonald's going, okay, now order, she asked you to order, ready? Oh, you said number 5. Number 5, okay, now get your quarter out, right? They leave us. So if we're not empowering them to be able to make their own decisions as much in wherever we're meeting them at with that, right? So even the most significant or the most impacted kid has ways we can empower them, right? People are like, well, my student, he's nonverbal. Yeah, okay, so how are you scaffolding to back up so he's doing things more independently, right? So when we're out of school, he's going to a volunteer work situation and being able to follow a schedule. And he didn't need somebody standing going, next, next, next. Right? So it might take me 20 years to get him to be able to go through a SET checklist, which, the last autism conference, I saw a woman who talks about technology. I've seen her twice now, I love her. And she was talking about using the Google apps to be able to do some of the executive functioning stuff we super get into, like in task schedules. And she was showing us this man had a Apple Watch, and when he showed up to work, it would read, it was connected to weather, so if it was sunny out, it would say, put on your hat. And they touch it, put on your sunglasses, touch it, go to station 1, and then it would know and locate him. And so where it used to take a supported work para, for him to go, okay, get this and this and this, or pictures, now it's just Apple Watch. And going, oh my gosh, sometime soon. She also said, don't ever buy anything super fancy, start with what everybody else is using, because the apps are around there. The things, the technology is where the regular user. Sorry. Which leads to independence. We're always working towards whatever piece of independence we can, and choice. Our kids with special needs get the least amount of choices. We choose everything for them. And sometimes it's just a basic, dude, what kind of writing utensil will you use today? Little choices matter too. Big choices matter, but there are ways to add in some of that. And always thinking about that social justice and the rights. with the special ed population, we are legally protected with our rights, with what needs to happen. And as you get more aware of that, you can use it as part of your oomph to get things to happen. But there's also that social justice piece, right? We all have the right to be who we want to be and not to have everybody around you tell you who you're going to be. And that doesn't change just because we have a difference and our brain is working differently than yours. So keeping that in mind and teaching and going through a lens of advocacy. So we go through and as a team, we decide what services we're going to provide to help change that data. Because the next thing you're going to do is analyze your progress. So when we go and say, okay, as we're going through the year, right, because an IEP process is a process that keeps going, it doesn't just stop after that paper's done. We're gathering our data, so we have something to fill in step one when we have the next conversation, okay? So when we think about that, I had data collection. This is from Robert Pennington. He's also in an autism conference a couple years ago. He was phenomenal. If you get stuck on data collection or your team is like creating like weird data and you're like, I don't even know what that means, we often need to just get back to just the facts. A lot of times because we get a lot of guesswork and opinion work in there and bias work in there, but really it's just the facts. And when you're thinking about analyzing that data, I love the 3-2-5. You collect data 3 times a week, check it every 2 weeks, and if you're making at least 5% change, you're in a positive direction. Now we're hoping it's more than 5% change, but at least 5% change, you're going in a direction that's positive. It's not something you need to rethink, okay? Depending on what your team decides. So it's 3 times a week, you take data, capture it, look at it every 2 weeks, and you're hoping for at least 5% change, okay? For those who find it difficult to collect data because our students are just, standard testing is not going to get it done. Social skills, it's not like any of our testing hits social skills in a really good way for the individual anyway. I love goal attainment skills, where you're breaking down all the pieces, and then your data is checking at what level a certain context that student responds. Right, so if I've got a child who is before words and their communication is often just turning their neck towards, or their body towards a need, right? I might be looking at, this thing was joint attention. So when we're looking at, the 0 is usually where the student's at. So right now the student grabs, right? The next one, student reached and used eye contact, or if it's a kid who doesn't use eye contact, shifts his body, right? So instead of just reaching, I shifted towards, body oriented towards you should really take eye contact out, because that's the one people think about in this you there, because this is an actual kid, that's why, who did use eye contact very well. Or once he got it. Shifting body, and then did we verbalize? So if the shifting body didn't work, or use some kind of verbalization if the student had it. And days that didn't, he just oriented or there was no response. Does that make sense? So you kind of break it down and we can see whether or not we're gaining interaction or not. So gas skills, I should show this example. Gas skills are really nice ones to get to very specific individual, especially social. Used a lot for social. Because those, it's not like I have a chapter test for that. But I need data on it, because it's a need that we had a goal on, and I got to prove it. So how do I prove it? So that's analyze. Make sure we're getting the data, making sure we're having that conversation. It's actually in the new forms that you have to have the conversation. So now there's a place where they ask, did you make sufficient gains? Do your goals met? And you say, yeah, they were, or no, they weren't. And you say, no, they weren't. Why? Right? People are like, well, we can't put those that didn't work. Yeah, there's lots of reasons that a goal might not work. But I'd be hard pressed if you had data 3 months in that a goal wasn't on track and you didn't do something about it. I might want to have a discussion about that. But there are reasons. You're hoping that that doesn't happen because your discussion is so deep that you guys are really aware of that kid, that you know where we're going and not. But that happens all in step 5. So these are the resources I showed you. They are linked on the page that I provided earlier. here is that discussion tool that I talked about. If you're like, you know what, I'm really done with just going through those pages. There's different access points, but basically the discussion tool asks you questions and you answer them and it shows you where to plug into the new forms. Like, oh, if you had this question, and it'll go, or you had this answer, it'll plug in here, or this in there. So reading drives achievement is another big piece within the CCRIPs. It's not because everybody needs a reading goal. That is a big myth. It's about the state picked reading for their results-driven accountability focus. And so now the IEPs just need to address it. Hey, does he have a reading deficit? No, actually reading's on track. Like, okay, thanks, tell me that. Right? And it's a couple different ways that they ask that. And then also that family engagement. There's a couple new questions about family engagement, about how you're engaging, what are you doing moving forward. So those are some of the big changes outside the lens of autism to be aware of, that when you're looking through some of these resources, you might want to check into if this is your first exposure to CCRIPs. Although I highly recommend that if you can, to go to one of the trainings that provided, or spend some time on the DPI website for the CCRIPs, because it is a great resource. Lots of modules and webinar things you can watch so that you can be empowered to know how to advocate and move your team forward and help them get what you need to for those kids. Yes, James?
My last comment on one other resource that I also want to share regarding IEPs and all that, which is not conventional. The great Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps, in his autobiography, No Limits, describes in great detail in a portion of that autobiography how him and his family fought to create a career-driven IEP for him with his ADD to accommodate his goal of becoming an Olympic swimmer. The process of how him and his family fought this high school system and fought the school system to get that career-driven IEP is an amazing success story that we can share and use.
Oh, thank you. All right, well, thanks for coming. And I kind of cut your discussion time short, but I feel like I put the discussion time in the middle. So I feel like I didn't take it away from you. I just didn't give you open time to just ask any question. So have a good day, and luckily it stopped raining, so I did that for you. You're welcome. And